And you are live on PM Express here on the JoyNews channel. Tonight, a very interesting conversation on the back of something that happened over the weekend, Saturday into Sunday. A historic victory for John Dramani Mahama in his own party in the presidential primary. 95% plus. Everybody else who contested him got between 1% and 0%. So, his grip over the NDC, some say, is complete and absolute. But is it a gamble? Is it a gamble we're taking because of his background? Somebody who lost the election in 2016 quite historically, with a historic margin of defeat. Many thought he was done. Has he completely now rehabilitated himself within the NDC? But can he also, most importantly, achieve the second leg of a challenge, which is rehabilitating himself before the Ghanaian people, the electorate, who would now consider electing him in 2020? These are questions that the NDC is already trying to figure out. But we'll try and figure it out ourselves here on the show. But for the NPP, what should this mean for them? Should they be jubilating, knowing how damaged John Mahama was after the 2016 elections? And is 4 years enough for Mahama to undo that damage? Should the NPP be jubilating? Should they be excited, or should they be cautious, or should they be in the room now, strategizing, now that they know who they'll be coming up against? It's almost a foregone conclusion now, barring very dramatic circumstances, that Nana Dankwa Akufo-Addo will run again. So we know the two individuals who will be slagging it out in 2020. Does that now make for a very interesting contest going forward? These are interesting conversations that we're beginning to have on the back of what happened on Saturday into Sunday. And so I've put together a guest of individuals who, one, know the man, but also have the analytical skills to unpack a lot of the things that has happened in the last 48 hours. My guest in the studio is Dr.Mensah. He is an analyst. He is a political communications expert, but also at the University of Ghana Business School. He's a lecturer there in political communications, political marketing. And he's the best person to talk to on this. But also from the camp of John Dramani Mahama. He's a man who was appointed by Mr. Mahama as the country's deputy communications minister, has been very close and has done a lot of the ground game as well, working with John Mahama's team, and has been there and seen it all himself. He is Felix Kwakye. So for something for time here on PMS.
My pleasure.
Where were you when the election results started trickling in? I wonder whether you were with Mahama.
I was not. I happened to be in the Abra Sebu Kwamankesi constituency, where I served as an agent for Mr. Mahama. So I had just sent in the results as was captured in that constituency. We recorded 96.5% victory margin for President Mahama. So I was on my way back to Accra when the declaration was made. So I did not have the opportunity to be at the party headquarters. But the role that I played in that constituency was important nonetheless, to ensure that the...
You were monitoring?
Votes, yes, I was. I was doing so on behalf of President Mahama. I was one of 3 agents of his in that constituency. And it was a strategic decision that we took, because we thought that there was no point clustering ourselves in Accra and leaving the work undone. It was far more important to get the votes in and have him win convincingly than sit in Accra and hope that results will flow. So as many of us as possible were sent out into the field to do the necessary legwork to ensure that victory was achieved. And it arrived in spectacular fashion. And we can only be thankful and appreciative of that.
There's something you said that struck me, that you wanted to ensure that the results come in and the margin is significant. Why was that important? That you don't just win, but win significantly. Why was that important?
No, the margin was important. Among other things, the NDC needed to state clearly that they were prepared for the 2020 elections, and that whoever emerged as leader had the absolute mandate of the party. We had always been confident that President Mahama would emerge. I mean, his stature and standing in society placed him head and shoulders above the competition. But it was absolutely vital for us that he got a margin that sent a very, very clear message, that made it clear to everybody else in the party that he was the choice of the party. And that sent a clear message to the incumbents that their time was perhaps up, and that they were going to face real competition in the shape of President Mahama come 2020. So we worked for that. And thankfully, we achieved the results that we desired.
So for you, this puts it beyond doubt that the NDC is united behind one man.
Absolutely. I mean, the margin was overwhelming. 95.23% as declared by the Electoral Commission. It's an overwhelming mandate. It is a statement of intent. And there can be no ambiguity about the readiness of the NDC to rally behind one man. And I have been gratified at the gracious manner in which the other candidates who were unsuccessful in the elections have all thrown their weights behind President Mahama. There has been no dispute at all about their own readiness to support the man to annex the ultimate diadem come 2020. So we are happy about the results. But for us, it also signals the beginning of the real work. And we are ever prepared to do what has to be done to salvage the fortunes of this country, which the MPP is determined to wreck in all respects.
Doc, the point he makes about the margins being important, you share that view?
Of course. I mean, it's coming, from the backdrop of the last elections where apathy had been signaled as one of the reasons why the NDC lost. So obviously, for you to demonstrate legitimacy, you need that huge margin so that it can send signal to yourself that perhaps people are coming around, they have forgiven you, and as a result, they're coming around to the table to make sure that they can actually prepare for the onslaught. Obviously, it also sends signal to your opposition that yes, indeed, the people have overwhelmingly endorsed your candidacy, and therefore set you in readiness for that competition. So I think it was crucial that he receives that particular endorsement, that massive support, to sort of throw all doubt, that he's really the man for.
And this is the thing that surprised me. I don't know what your thoughts is. This is John Mahama, who after the 2016 elections, almost everybody I spoke to in the party blamed him for the defeat, including their own Kwakye report, mentioning him, but the people he surrounded himself with and putting blame at their doorstep for the defeat. And you thought that there's no way even in his own party they'll forgive him for this, right? And we didn't really hear the KB report say. There were leading figures in the NDC who were publicly castigating the man, including people he appointed in his government, publicly castigating him for leading this horse into a race and delivering such a woeful result. And yet, 2 years down the line, these same people, the delegates who, and remember, the Kwakye guys went around. In some places, the grassroots were so upset that there were scuffles, there were some violence in some places when Kwakye had gone there to seek people's view, because they were just totally upset. Does it surprise you that, is it to the strength of John Mahama, or just that the parties believe they didn't have a choice, that he's the only person who could?
It doesn't surprise me. See, that actually tells you what is ahead of us, that voters can be forgiven.
Who do you credit for that? Is it John Mahama's skills that...
Well, I suppose it's the reality. I think it's the reality of the day. When immediately after the election, tempers are high, etc. But then moving down the line, when the reality starts setting in and people seeing, what happened and then what is unfolding now, they're able to compare and then think that...
You need to explain that. When you say unfolding now, what is it that...
Exactly. Quite a number of people are not satisfied, with the status quo at the moment, especially if you talk to...
As in the state of this country right now.
Exactly. A lot of people are disillusioned because there were certain promises made. People think that they haven't actually fulfilled it. Obviously, the administration had also fulfilled certain promises, but people think that it's not enough. Now, when it happens like that, then the delegates are going to think, wow, there is a window of opportunity that even when we thought that Mahama perhaps didn't perform, all the things that were set against. Of course, when you look at the economic narrative, for example, and people, when you look at Twitter, people actually playing back, those conversations at the time of elections. Then the delegates are going to say, well, we think that we probably had a better candidate, than what we thought we had. And as a result, why don't we bring it up? And that's why I say that actually sets, us for 2020. Now, you could think that, yes, the voters are not going to actually give, John perhaps a chance. But look at what is happening with the delegates. People were so bent on saying he's not coming back. I know that. I remember I had conversations with people, and I said to them, way down the line, I said to them, look, best candidate would be John. And people say, oh, no way. And I had a lot of my colleagues at lunch. I told them that, look, that would be the playbook. They said, no way. Down the line, he's back. So I'm telling you that what is ahead of us in 2020 is a beautiful competition where we're going to witness a very tough one that we have never seen before. So the issue is that when the dust settles, when the delegates were so annoyed, etc., and the dust settled, they at least have the position to compare and say, well, we think we have perhaps a stronger candidate going forward.
Thankfully, Felix, you're an insider.
Sure.
Was it, did Mahama set out after 2016, after all the bashing he got from within, to say, I'm going to work at this deliberately, or this has just happened by chance?
No, it certainly has not happened by chance. It is not unusual after a defeat of the sort that we suffered in 2016 for there to be some finger pointing and blame game. And of course, he has been on record as saying that he took responsibility for the defeat, even if there were roles played by others. We had gone into the 2016 elections hopeful of victory, but it didn't turn out the way we wanted. We lost. It was necessary for us to do the necessary introspection and reflection, which we did. We went through a very methodic process of identifying what the causes of our defeat could have been and finding remedies to them. There was a brief period of acrimony where some could simply not bear the defeat and therefore decided to take it on others. There was a period of uncertainty. We went into a state of flux, but we pulled together as a party and then began a series of reorganization steps that have culminated in the election of a flagbearer. In all of this, and the former president has been on record as having said that he took time to reflect soberly upon his own career and what he had achieved up to that point. He also came under considerable pressure, as you would be aware, from various sections of Ghanaian society, both within and without the party. And you make the point that there were a number of prominent figures within the NDC who publicly went out and criticized the former president. But what you have not mentioned, that there were many more prominent persons within the NDC who urged him on and asked him to consider running again. And as you already do know, the groundswell of support was such that he could simply not ignore it. I mean, it is enticing for someone in his position to just decide to walk off into the sunset and enjoy the peace and quiet of retirement. After all, he will get some perks and largesse from the state. But there comes a time when one has to throw his hat into the ring again, considering a number of factors, not least amongst them the very parlous state in which we find ourselves as a country, the underperformance of the new patriotic party, and the need for the NDC to put its very best foot forward. So if you are going into an election in 2020 and you have someone who has another term left in the event that he wins, and who has the same stature as the incumbent, and who has a record on which he can run, and who has the experience and gravitas to be able to attract the needed attention, who has the name and facial recognition, that makes it less difficult for you to market him. I see no reason why anybody would choose any other candidate apart from him. So there was a certain objective reality which the party folks considered and which Mr. Mahama himself gave thought to and therefore decided to step into the ring. And the results that has come out shows clearly that he took the right decision. And those of us who supported him have been vindicated. So he bears responsibility for what, no, let me rephrase. He actually needs to take credit for this. But it is not easy, having come under that barrage of attacks and criticism from people within and without. And
you think he's won them over?
No, substantially he has. I mean, there were many people who set out as critics of his, who in the long run joined his campaign. And his campaign team, Comet, had people of tremendous stature within the NDC playing various roles there. It told you right away that this was a cause that people believed in and that he was a man that people thought could deliver victory for the NDC in 2020. So it was the right decision with the benefit of hindsight and with the overwhelming results that have been achieved in the just ended primaries. And it is a lesson for political scientists and students of history that it is possible to rise from defeat like the phoenix and shed off the gap that one could associate with some disappointment and don one that inspires hope and confidence in your own people and the country as large. So in a nutshell, it was a wise decision for him to come back. And we are happy to have been associated.
I like your Phoenix example, but that will be a part of the conversation, a significant part of the conversation when we apply to 2020. He's done it within the party, and some say this is just a battle.
Sure.
The war is yet about to be fought.
Well, it is a war.
Whether the Phoenix example will suffice. But Doc, before we go for a break, and I know you have a lot to say on this quickly, but before you, in addition to what you're about to say on this, I want to add this. Is it the case that the delegates really saw John Mahama and the others and felt they really don't have a choice? I mean, if you look at the field of other contenders against him, they looked at them and they felt we just didn't have a choice. And the only person that really, amongst the competition that he had, could get us close to anything of as akin to victory is John Mahama. And that's the only reason why they voted for him. And that if he had somebody else in the campaign, I don't know who it was, other than Zitano, who had broken away from the party and come back, other than Sio Gabra, who had, angered a lot of the party folks already by describing some of his colleagues at Team B, other than Nuruddin, who nobody really knew until now, other than Bagboin, who himself has really endeared himself because he had gone and washing the party's dirty linen in public and calling John Mahama names, and so he wasn't really somebody people really loved in the NDC. Other than who else? Other than I mentioned Malbin right now. Other than Alabi, Alabi himself had been in political hiatus for a long time after his Krowa days, had gone into academia, had cut ties with politics for a while, had done nothing political, right, for 2 decades. And I just popped up now, and so people were struggling to reconnect. So all these other guys had huge disadvantages. If you look at it and analyze, isn't that what really gave John Mahama the victory, and not because he's done anything extraordinary?
The point is that, Evans, whoever you bring into the fore will definitely have negatives and positives, all right? I have a belief that whoever actually becomes a candidate in the political field, you would have baggages, you have limitations. It's up to your strategy. And let's appreciate, John Mahama just left office, and he has a huge machinery behind him. He has people he's worked with, he can trust in, he has a belief in them. Obviously, he has resource advantage, all right? So with that particular machinery, he can move and move swiftly, all right? Again, like you said, when the voters actually the delegates actually cast their minds, and they look at who is within the immediate to deliver. And we did a poll that we were looking at the reasons why people actually choose the leader. And a lot of them are actually looking at, 1, who can win the election for us, 2, who has a vision for the country. So the issues about corruption and things, people really not giving it a thought. All right, issues about ethnicity and things, people are really not giving it a thought.
I'm surprised, because corruption has been an issue that people decide elections on in this country.
When we look at corruption, all right, and people will tell you, within the political field, as a sector, where wouldn't you say, or who wouldn't you say is being corrupt? I mean, within the political field, politicians are always branded as corrupt, as a unitary body.
Well, the NDC brands Nanado as incorruptible man.
Well, of course, they would say that. They would position that. I mean, the MPP would position that. But the voters actually think that politicians in a bunch. Exactly. So that's why it makes, the anti-corruption campaign somehow not a seller, because people would say, of course, who is not corrupt. Exactly. So if you look at it, and they look at Mahama machinery, and they think that this is ready, a machinery that is ready, that can actually take them to the promised land 2020. So I think that, yes, he has the machinery, but then also, the other candidate are not so, sort of a battle ready, if you can put it that way, because of the machinery behind John Mahama. For me, but I think that, again, it's about a strategy. If these guys who actually came on board, had, a much more superior strategy in terms of organizational, kind of pieces together, etc., perhaps they could have actually assailed. And of course, the message wasn't connected.
You mentioned resources. Could that have been an overwhelming factor? Because it's
crucial. You cannot eliminate resources.
The rest cannot compare.
Exactly. You cannot eliminate resources from the game plan if you're actually going in for a political battlefield. I mean,
so that was his advantage.
It is an advantage. Resources is a huge advantage, not only in terms of cash or forever.
So
for example,
couldn't that be the reason why? Couldn't that be the reason why he won by this margin? Not because he was some fantastic reborn
but you couldn't actually take that away and other factors away. Yeah. Certainly, if he had resources, but not believability that he can deliver, surely they won't vote for him.
Yeah, they might. Delegates might vote for you after you've given them food, branded foods, and
Felix was talking about, if he didn't actually play his role, connecting to the people and saying, I take responsibility, I think I've learned from this, I think I'm going to, and he was disconnected from the party, then certainly, regardless of resources, you're not going to.
They might actually take your money, spend it, and still vote for somebody else.
So certainly, resources alone can't
be the factor.
Exactly, there will be other factors.
We'll take a shot, but before we do that, I want to bring Felix in on this one. But I also want to ask you, and I'll throw all that to Felix before we go for a break. So he's won, but there are people in the party still, like the Rawlingses, and people of his generation, right, who didn't really side with John Mahama. In fact, if you look at Alabi's folks who backed him, you got stalwarts in the party, who came up, the behos of the NDC. These are the people you call the proper founders of the party who backed him. Kendrasa, people who had the backing, those who backed Alabi, like, wow, I mean, this guy can pull the trick. However, we saw what happened. And Jomama's control over the party with the results shows an absolute control over the NDC. Is that a problem for him going forward? I mean, the problem, as in the founder and his people.
I don't think so. I think there's a recognition that there is a generation that is actually emerging. I mean, if you look at leadership,
the John Mahama generation.
Of course. I mean, in every electoral cycle, there's someone who actually takes over the party. Just like what happened in MPP. I mean, Nana completely took over the MPP, and actually ran with it. Certainly, it's about time that Mahama take control,
and he has with this election.
And he has taken a control. So I don't think there is going to be a problem for the party leadership, i.e., the stalwarts of the party, because they should rather see it as you are better off, as Kufuor would say, that you're better off to be a messenger in a ruling government and a ruling party than to be a leader of an opposition party. You are better off in an NDC win than MPP win. So whatever kind of negatives that they have, whatever kind of issues that they may have because they don't have a strong hold of the party, I think they are better off shedding off that and making sure that the party succeeds, because it is in your interest to do that. So I don't think that they would have an issue.
What should he do? Should he gloat and say, look, this is my time, the Rawlings is...
No, I think it would be a bad strategy.
I mean, I'm just going on with my or what should he do?
I think he has to be all-embracing.
Okay.
He has to be all-embracing.
I mean, considering Rawlings didn't go to vote.
Yeah, no,
he should reach out to him nonetheless.
Exactly. And I
think that he has control, absolute control.
I've seen images, I've seen pictures on Twitter.
He's
been there.
Okay.
And these are some of the things you do. It's not in your interest to actually shed off people in
But
politics.
he has control. He doesn't need one.
But no, it's not necessary. I mean, you have to be seen. And even the voters want to see whether you are unified.
Okay.
And I'm sure, when you go back to Kufuor again, Kufuor talks about, the fact that he's a unifier, he can bring on board coalitions of different interests. This is what you want to show. You want to show that you are not a divisive character. You want to show that whoever has an issue, you want to bring them on board. You want to show that consensus, building character, as opposed to a character that's divisive. It won't help you, regardless of your control of the party. You do not want to actually sideline some.
No matter how small that constituency is, you still need to reach out to them.
Exactly,
Felix.
It's crucial.
Well, it is not entirely accurate that those who belong to the older generation within the NDC supported other candidates other than President Mahama.
Okay.
Indeed, President Mahama had more NDC stalwarts, or those who were considered to belong to the older generation, than all the others combined.
Okay.
Indeed, his campaign team, Comet, was chaired by Mr. Atuahoi.
Okay.
The vice chairman of that team was Mr. Kwame Pipra. It had the likes of Professor Kwame Nahoi, Mr. Ohinejo Kumu was a campaign coordinator, Mr. Zutobi Kwakye played an influential role, and many, many others that I can cite. So it is not accurate that Mr. Mahama does not enjoy the support of the older generation. Again, Mr. Mahama is not the sort of person to ward off support. He's not the sort of person to isolate others and punish them only because they supported other candidates. I think he was quite clear in his acceptance speech that he was willing to work with everybody. I noted earlier on that even the losing candidates have all indicated their readiness to work with Mr. Mahama.
With the exception of Guzi, though.
Well, in fact, Mr. Guzitano issued a statement. The very first paragraph indicated that he was willing to do everything he could to help Mr. Mahama.
I spoke to him live on my show.
Yes, but his statement is unambiguous.
I don't know if you listened.
Well, I did not listen, but the point is that the statement...
Says it depends.
No, he issued a statement in which he made it clear. Okay. There was no ambiguity.
With him?
Yes.
Because when I asked him the question, he says, I'll work with the party. And I'm like, my question is not about the party, it's about John Mahama. And he says, with John Mahama, it depends.
He issued a statement, this is a matter of public record, in which he states clearly that he was going to assist Mr. Mahama succeed as leader of the NDC. So there's no ambiguity about that. I'm sure it's only a matter of reaching out to him, finding out exactly what his concerns are. But if you look at the mood of the party today, everybody who matters, everybody who has a role to play is willing to do what they can in order to ensure the forward march of the NDC, and most importantly, the victory of the NDC in 2020. So we are not a party that is in the mood at this time for division and ostracization, no matter what you may have done in the past. Mr. Mahama himself has shown in the way that he selected his campaign team and composed it, that he was willing to work with anybody who was ready to come on board. So I do not anticipate that there will be difficulties at all going forward in that particular regard. Also, you know, come at the hour, come at the man. Every generation has had its leader. The NDC started with President Rawlings as a strongman. By 2000, his influence had whittled down a bit, and it had been taken over by Professor Mills. By the time we got to 2008, Professor Mills was in absolute control of the party. It passed on to President Mahama, and I'm sure it will pass on from him to another person if a new leader emerges in the future. And these are seasoned politicians who understand what it takes to be able to control a party at some point and hand it over to someone. Now, we are all bound as a party to support whoever emerges as the leader. And our constitution makes the flag bearer the leader of the party, who works in concert with the national executives and all other arms of the party, right up or right down to the branch level. So I do not see any problem emerging at all in terms of the leadership of the party. It is absolutely important that there's clarity and there's stratification so that everybody knows who the boss is at every time. All of us would then be enjoined to work up to him so that we succeed collectively. It is an objective fact that should not raise any eyebrows. What can lead to difficulties is when certain people are isolated and punished because of a certain view that they may have held in the past. But Mr. Mahama is not the sort of person to go on that tangent and be vindictive and single out people for punishment and ostracization because of what they may have said. I think that he's shown enough gravitas. He's shown that he has a big heart. He's shown that he has what it takes to forgive. He's shown that he has what it takes to reach over to people on the other side if it is necessary to ensure that we achieve the collective objective. So I see no difficulty at all.
And you want to stay with us because when we return from this break, we'll talk about John Mahama and 2020.
Sure.
So he's won the battle. The party is in his total grit now. But how is the 2020 race itself going to shape up with him at the helm of the NDC? And then we'll also look at what this means for the MPP. They've been speaking about John Mahama. We'll examine that. We'll hear from the national organizer of the MPP, and we'll examine some of the things he says. Stay with us here on PM Express. You're still live on PM Express. My guest in the studio, Dr.Mensah, with the University of Ghana Business School. Also with me is a former Deputy Communications Minister, Felix Kwakye, and a man in the camp of the John Dramani Mahama 2020 campaign. Dr. Mensah, so John Mahama has won the battle, but can he win the war? Which is the most important thing, 2020. Looking at where he's coming from 2016. You think he can turn it around? He's convinced the delegates that he's a change man. Can he convince the rest of the country that he is, that he's worth voting for?
Well, never say never. I mean, in political strategy, you're looking at the voters, not the competitor. You know, what the voters say is final. So you want to take the opportunity to really gauge the voters' mood, the sentiments, you know, going forward, and your ultimate intention. So for me, I always say that every political party, any presidential candidate can win the elections when they do the right thing. And doing the right thing means that gauging, the intentions of the voter. So yes, he can win. Yes, the NPP can win.
He can?
Yeah, of course, he can win. He can win because if he does the right thing,
What specifically for him?
Of course, I mean, the voters voted you out because they thought that they were not satisfied with your performance, and therefore they voted you out. Now, if you go back there and say that, guys, I've actually changed, and let's look at the kind of...
He's been saying that in the last
some of the
months.
things that actually, got, him kicked out. One, apathy from his own quarters. Now, judging by the kind of command, that he had in the elections, that suggests that there's some kind of repair, from that front. Obviously, not all the NDC, followers actually voted, just delegates. But if the delegates actually give him that resounding, support, which means that they are prepared to work, they're prepared to make sure that they can work their party, to its advantage. So it means they're going to do that, damage, control, making sure that they can bring the people on board. Two, it's about the economy and whether, people are convinced that the current regime has actually done what perhaps they claim Mahama couldn't do. And if that is actually brought into the equation, then again, that could actually give him the foothold or not. And then the third is about the MPP's own strategy, going forward. So for me, you have so many other factors that you must consider, in this fight. And then, if you ask me, I can tell you that yes, it's possible.
But strictly, if you look at it, 4 years is a long time in politics, true. But for a man who got the sort of defeat he got in 2016, with all the things that he was tagged with, that the results told us stack, the incompetence tag, the corruption tag, the John Mahama family and friends tag from his own party, that people threw at him. If the voters voted him out, I'm assuming they bought it. They bought those tags, right? What must he do to shake these things off? Yes, he's been saying I'm a changed man, but is that enough for him to just say?
No, it is not enough. I mean, you've got to show
in real specific terms.
Yeah, you've got to show evidence. And before we came here, I was saying that there is a narrative of second coming in all our socio-cultural environment. If you look into our culture, we say that you don't despise a son that has gone wayward.
Yeah.
So of course there's a second chance. Obviously, if you look into the scripture, there's a second coming narrative of a prodigal son. All right. Now, if you show the evidence, and if you look at the prodigal son evidence, he came back with a completely a remorseful heart and tell the father that I have actually changed. Now, what must you do? Who are you working with? Who are within your closest?
Associating with? Exactly. Have you changed your company?
Exactly, because
has he changed his company?
Because
that's a big question.
But of course, I don't know.
You should, but he outdone his campaign team recently.
No, but you see that campaign team may not be the campaign team going forward into the 2020 elections.
Yeah.
So the point is that those within your cabinet, are they seen as the most competent, to manage the economy? Yeah. Other than those you used to have that people had issues with. The kind of issues that people had in terms of change this person, and then people, of course, you're not supposed to let the electorate dictate to you who you must work with or not. But it's so crucial for people to see that you are in control, of your own, cabinet or of your own inner circle. Yeah. So if you don't show that mettle, if you don't show that leadership qualities of being a firm person, of being astute, of being, sort of a doer of your own words, then of course the people are going to see you in a certain light and say you don't have the leadership qualities. So one is, and the very crucial one is about his inner circle. Who are the people you're going to assemble? Can the public or can the voter really see, say, indeed, this man is there and therefore the work can be done. Indeed, this woman is there and therefore the work can be done. If you're not able to assemble that visible presence, that yes, there's a changed management, and this change management is going to take the issue head on and solve it, you're not going to actually cut through. So which means that you have to be very functional. They have to present a very functional machine that could take this economy, and work it the way that people wanted it.
Tough question for you. So the delegates gave him an overwhelming mandate to lead the party. Did they gamble?
I don't think they gambled. For me, I think...
Is John Mahama a gamble?
I don't think it's a gamble.
You think it's not?
No, I don't think it's a gamble. I think it's a clear, battle-ready engine for the election, for the MPP.
I mean, considering all that he's coming, the 2016 package is coming with, it's still not a gamble.
I have already said that as a strategy.
Because
I've already said that as a
strategy. Because for the MPP, there's a lot in 2016 they can use against him.
No, but they also have a lot against the MPP.
I mean,
you remember,
because of the
and exactly because of incumbents. When you're incumbent, you have a lot more problems than the opposition.
True.
And just like MPP is now facing that reality.
Yeah.
A lot of things that they said is actually hitting against them right now. So of course they're doing some fantastic things as well. So for me, and I keep saying that as a strategy, you would never give me a candidate that I would say is a losing candidate. No, Every candidate has a potential to win, but depends on what are the evidence, what are you putting
together. Which is what you've touched on.
Exactly.
Felix, so clearly, your task, you've won the battle. The war is facing you. And from what Doc has said, what you need to do to win the war, it's pretty Herculean. You concede.
You see, I can assure you that we are ever prepared for the war, having won the battle. You see, elections are essentially about the future. But they are first and foremost a referendum on the performance of the incumbents. And two other things come into the equation. Apart from it being a referendum, that is, people assessing the performance of the incumbent vis-a-vis the commitments and promises that they made. For instance, I have been looking at the MPP manifesto. At the last reckoning, they made 280 separate promises. You have heard the president and the vice president claim on some platforms that they have fulfilled 41 of them. If you do strike an average, that's 14.6%. It's a woeful performance for a government that has been in power for 2 years. Let us assume that over the next 2 years, they do another 14%. That's 28% out of 100. It is a woeful performance. If you attain that in an exam, and Dr. Mensah here is a lecturer, that is a horrible failure. So if your performance is that poor, you cannot go into an election thumping your chest and writing off the opponent. The second thing that comes into focus is the alternative that the opponent offers, because elections are essentially about the future. In 2016, the MPP presented tantalizing promises that people believed, but they have been found wanting implementing those. Now, the third one then is the personalities. Who are those driving the campaigns? What is their message and what is their track record, especially in an instance where you have a former president who, in every sense of the word, is the equal of the incumbent. He has been there before. He is no less experienced than the incumbents. And in many cases, in the case of President Mahama, he has records that the incumbent will not come close to on the evidence of what he sees. Look, there is not a single sector, and I dare say it, where the incumbent can outmaneuver President Mahama. What is President Akufo-Addo's record in health, for instance? What is his record in water?
He says he's fixed NHIS.
Well, he has fixed nothing. The NHIS has a 16-month arrears that he has not paid.
He says he's paid everything.
Well, he's not paid everything.
He says he's paid
he's not paid everything.
Billion. That you left.
No, he's not. That was paid in 2017. He has not paid 1.2 billion every year since he came into power.
Okay, but he paid it in 2017.
The point I'm making is that what is his record? Indeed, the most notable achievements in health have been achieved by the First Lady. She has put up at least neonatal clinics. What has President Akufo-Addo put up? What is President Akufo-Addo's record in water provision, for instance? I will tell you President Mahama's record. He added 109.2 million gallons of water production capacity. That is water for 7 million people. How much water has President Akufo-Addo added? What is his record in roads? What is his record in housing? What is his record in energy? What is his record in communications? What is his record in education? What is his record in health?
Education is done free SHS.
No, if you decide that you are going to pump all your money into paying fees on behalf of parents and leave everything else to rot, such that our education completely lies in shambles as we speak, where children live under horrendous conditions. Where, look, you spoke about the poll offer. The poll conducted by the political science department. Yes. About 72% of respondents said the double track system was a horrible system that needed to go. So if you create a difficulty through the poor implementation of a policy, you cannot tout that as an achievement compared to a competitor who is on record as having started the establishment of 123 secondary schools, not just classroom blocks.
That people couldn't afford.
No, it is not true. The numbers do not bear.
Which is what he's fixed now.
No, the numbers do not bear out what you are saying. Look, it is okay if you pay fees for people. But as of the time that President Akufo-Addo came to power, there were hundreds of thousands of students in SHS. The only addition he's made is 63,000 for the 2017-2018 academic year. In the 2018-2019 academic year, I think enrollment went up by about 90,000. So, on the evidence of the figures alone, you cannot say that people were not paying fees. If it was the case that you came into power and about 300,000 more people have had access, then immediately you point it out. But if you decide that you will pump all your money into consumption, you will not make any investments into the expansion of infrastructure, and children go to school only for their parents to pay sometimes 250 Ghana cedis per subject so that they can have extra classes conducted for their wards, which amounts to about the same money they will pay if free SHS was not in place. You have achieved nothing. So what is his record in everything else? I mean, aviation, for instance. President Mahama can boast.
Expanding
no. President Mahama can boast.
Lines.
President Mahama can boast of Terminal 3. He can boast of the whole airport. He can boast of the one airstrip that has been
Everything you're pointing to is physical infrastructure.
No, it's not physical infrastructure.
But the development of the country is not only in physical infrastructure.
Evans,
it's in policy as well.
I have spoken to you about sectors. Yeah. When you go to the
but each sector you mentioned, you cite physical infrastructure.
Evans, people need water. It is a basic, essential commodity. In Ghana, here, there are about 20% of our population that do not have access to water. You are not telling me that a government that fixes that does not deserve credit, and that all we need as a government are poorly conceived consumption-related policies. All that President Akufo-Addo is doing is pumping money into consumption. It is the reason why he's borrowed so much, 52 billion Ghana cedis in the last 2 years, when he actually promised he wouldn't borrow, and yet he's not able to account for anything tangible. It is the reason why he's taken 3 billion Ghana cedis out of statutory funds and spent on consumption with no tangible outcome.
No tangible outcome?
No, when I say there's no tangible outcome, there are about 700 abandoned school projects in the education sector.
Physical infrastructure?
No, not physical infrastructure, but they fall into sectors. Yeah. You need roads. You need bridges.
But if
you need airports. But what else has he done?
If you look at the 2019 budget,
what has Akufo-Addo done that has not been done?
The 2019 budget shows that in the next 2 years, they tend to switch now to physical infrastructure. So they devoted a lot of money.
Then defeats your argument completely. That if physical infrastructure was not important, why are they saying that they will focus on it? In any event, what do they have to show?
Maybe they plan that in the next 2 years they're going to do so.
All they have to show is an agreement.
In fact, the argument is that they spent the last 2 years stabilizing the economy.
You see, again,
that you left them.
Let us talk about the economy.
Right? Now that they stabilize, now they can invest in other things.
And I dovetail it into the claims that you made about incompetence, corruption, and family affairs.
Which was stats were thrown at him.
No, but you see, those who shouted incompetence have been proven to be utterly hopeless in the management of the economy. Dr. Bawumia used to say that if you were in doubt about the management of the economy, check the exchange rate. Today, I went to a bank to do a transaction in Forex. I had to pay 7.148 Ghana cedi to obtain $1 British pound sterling. Today, the dollar is what? 5.4, 5.5 for some.
Well over 5.
So the exchange rate is in shambles. Again, look at borrowing, one of the attack lines against the NDC. They have borrowed 52 billion Ghana cedis. Our debt to GDP ratio is now bigger than they met it, and yet they cannot account for it in terms of tangible outcomes. Look at the taxes that they've heaped on the business community. They've recently increased VAT by 5%. They've introduced a luxury car tax. Import duties have gone up, and several taxes have also come on.
But they've also reduced and knocked off some taxes.
No, there are more taxes today than there were. Why? You knock off taxes, import levy, right? You knock it off, and yet importers pay far more today than they did in the past. It's not the exchange rate alone. They've introduced what they call the cargo tracking notes and the benchmark system, which then reclassifies goods and makes importers pay far more than they were paying. Surely, if you spoke to an importer at Abosokan, he would relish a situation under President Mahama, where he paid less for the same quantity of goods than he is doing now. Look at the price of fuel, for instance. And indeed, it was one of the issues that they used to raise in opposition. That fuel was too expensive. It should be reduced. Today, Ghanaians pay far more for fuel than they did. Now, let's talk about corruption. What have they been able to prove since they came into power?
Well, some of the guys have just been sent to court.
Well, you see, when you send somebody to court, that is a far cry from obtaining a conviction. And you and I have followed some of the cases in court and how government is not having a rosy time in many of the trials.
It just started, so we don't know how it's going to pan out.
But if it just started, it cannot then be highlighted as evidence of proof of corruption. You also spoke about family and friends. President Mahama had only one relative in government, Madam Joyce Bawa. This president has dozens of relatives in government. He has established the most nepotistic government in our history. Surely, if ever the candidates were to be assessed on these three things, President Mahama will stand head and shoulders above President Akufo-Addo. Indeed, he will literally dwarf the man.
So 2020, you think that...
So, you see, I have been surprised that for a party like the MPP, whose leader, President Akufo-Addo, suffered 2 electoral defeats in succession, they seek to dismiss others. You spoke about baggage. I can assure you, Evans, nobody has come into elections with more baggage than President Akufo-Addo. The reason why he lost 2 elections on the trot was the amount of baggage that he carried.
No, but I'm talking about baggage in terms of the man, because the question that voters will ask you is, what is it that John Mahama can tell us that he's going to do now that he didn't have opportunity to do?
What about the counter question? What is it that President Akufo-Addo can tell us he will do going forward that he's not be able to do in the last 4 years? After all, President Mahama was president for 4 years. And I have already proven to you.
So he applies to John Mahama?
No, but I have proven to you that when you set the 2 men side by side, in terms of record, measurable, tangible achievements. President Mahama is far ahead of him in many sectors. So what is it that President Akufo-Addo is bringing to the table? So beyond flowery rhetoric and empty promises.
So you brought me to my next big conversation, which is what this means for the NPP themselves. Watch Sammy Uku, who is a national organizer of the NPP.
This is the first time you have a former president who went on retirement but changed his mind midway through to come save his party. And we congratulate President Mahama on his victory.
Do you think it's an act of desperation that he's desperate to become a president?
I don't want to go into that, but I think that what I find a bit intriguing is his position that, you know, he wants to come and correct mistakes.
Of course, I mean, he's mentioned that.
When you are a leader of a nation, and when you are president of a republic, any breach of good decision can lead to loss of lives. Yeah. Policy decision, security decision, economic decision. So which of the mistakes is Mr. Mahama coming to correct? That is what has been lost in the narrative. He should let us know those decisions that he took when he was in office, that he thinks that upon sober reflection, he shouldn't have taken those decisions.
You are challenging him to that?
Yes, I'm challenging, because other than that, then we are all left, you know, in a wonderland. That and Sylvester Mensah gave him a very solid response. One of the aspirants in the NDC, the just ended flag bearership contest, said the presidency cannot be a place where you go to correct mistakes. So Mr. Mahama's position is a big insult to the Ghanaian people.
See?
And I'm saying this because that means he did not just waste our 4-year term. He wasted our 8 years period under him. So which period was it a mistake? Is it when he was vice or when he was president? And which decisions to him encompasses or constitutes that bunch of mistakes that he made? So
Sammy Uku there, Prof, let me bring you in from what you just said there. So this is John Mahama trying to rebrand. And he's been using that line a lot, that in essence, listen, if I've made mistakes, I've learned from them, I'm ready to fix it. In fact, just when he did his acceptance speech, one of the things is that it's not about how many times you fall, but how you quickly pick yourself up and continue. So that's an admission that I fell. And that's the point that NPP is putting to him. That if you fell, then...
No, they should expect that. You see, and they should expect and strategize for that. Because certainly once you say you made a mistake, your opposition is coming to tell you that if you made a mistake, then of course you're not, you know, you don't have.
But how does he deal with that? Isn't that a big challenge?
No, it's not a challenge.
How is he going to do that?
See, the issue is that your time frame, and I always say, you know, like when Felix was recounting the issue, one of the biggest issues that I had with NDC is the time frame within which they implemented certain raft of, you know, policy and then did a lot of constructions. You know, you remember, overnight a road has been built, etc. Overnight something has been built. The voter is going to ask you, so if you could do all these, why couldn't you do it earlier? And political parties have actually...
But because of time, what do you think he needs to do? See the narrative that NPP is spinning, how they're spinning it.
I think he needs to position you know, himself. Obviously, it is good to admit that you made a mistake, but you have to actually prepare yourself with the response of what mistakes you did and whether that was actually...
So you agree that he used to put out the mistakes?
No, of course, and he has to. But he needs to catch the positioning
properly.
Right, you know, going into the election.
Felix.
Evans, ultimately, when a voter goes to the polls in 2020, they will be looking at what President Akufo-Addo has done based on what he said he would do before they consider anything else. So I'm surprised that Sammy Oko says there and tickles himself. He speaks about mistakes. Why? There's a wise man who says that, you see, the sins of the opposition are frozen in time, but governments sin every day. So they will be going to the polls with a raft of sins, with a shipload of sins, and they will be punished by the same electorate that punished President Mahama in 2016. So sometimes I wonder what they think. They think that in spite or irrespective of how poorly they perform, irrespective of how abysmal they conduct themselves in government, Ghanaians are going to vote for President Akufo-Addo simply because he's called President Akufo-Addo. There can be no greater mistake of judgment or delusion of achievement than that. So they should simply tickle themselves and laugh. And they will be taken by surprise at how the elections will turn out in 2020. On the issue of mistakes, I'm not sure that President Mahama has said that he's coming to correct mistakes. He has only said that definitely mistakes would have been committed, which is why he would have been voted against.
So they say, tell us the mistakes.
No, you see, the point is that, and even in the discussion of that, we have to look at how, over time, he's been vindicated by many of the things that have happened in the period that he's been out of power. Look at how this government has fumbled on the issue of borrowing. They said that it was wrong to borrow, and that it was only people who could not manage the economy who borrowed.
So we need to go. You think as far as strategy, and as far as strategy of being honest with Ghanaians about the change,
but
it's going to go a step further and say this and this I thought I got wrong.
I've told you that elections are about the future.
Okay.
When he comes to the table in 2020, he has to tell Ghanaians what he will do over the next 4 years if he's voted for.
So that's what the focus is.
It is President Akufo-Addo who has to account to Ghanaians what he did with their mandate and resources.
Okay.
That
Felix,
is what
I'm grateful that you joined us. Doc, I'm grateful. But these are very interesting times, and we are in uncharted waters. Disbelieve anybody who says we've been here before and knows how this is going to pan. Nobody knows. It hasn't happened before. No analyst can figure this out. No poll can predict this. Ask the Americans. They thought the polls had predicted it until they started laughing on the wrong side of the map. Stay with us as we begin to tear this apart going into 2020. My name is Dr.Mensah. Enjoy the radio. Rest of the day.